I didn't realize how far things had slipped until I caught myself apologizing for something I didn't even do. That moment hit me like a punch to the chest. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quiet sting in my gut, the kind you can't ignore once you finally notice it. That was the first time I thought, oh, something is seriously wrong here. I'm a line cook at a small neighborhood diner, nothing fancy. I work early mornings, come home smelling like hash browns and burnt toast, and I actually like the routine. I share a small apartment with my girlfriend Leah. When we first moved in together, life felt simple. We split chores, split bills, split stress. At least that's what I thought. It started with small stuff, tiny comments that didn't land right. Leah would sigh loudly when I got home, like my very presence disrupted her peace. If I asked what was wrong, she'd say, "Nothing. You're overthinking again," then roll her eyes. If I misheard something, she'd smirk and say, "You really need to listen better." Always a soft jab, always coded in that playful tone people use when they want to get away with being mean. She didn't work at the time. She said she was figuring things out. I was fine covering a little more of the bills temporarily, but temporarily stretched into months, then almost a year. Whenever I hinted at finances, she'd flip it around. Why was I making her feel guilty? Why was I stressing her out? Why couldn't I be patient while she found the right path? I brushed it off because I cared about her, because I wanted to be supportive, because I thought love meant giving someone room to grow. But slowly, the giving started to feel one-sided. The turning point came with the calendar situation, a dumb thing on the surface. I kept a small notebook where I tracked my work schedule, bills, and personal reminders. Nothing dramatic, just my version of a life jacket in the chaos. One morning I couldn't find it. I searched everywhere. Kitchen counter, TV stand, couch cushions. Nowhere. Leah, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, glanced over and said, "Maybe you misplaced it again. You really need to be more organized." Something in her tone made me pause. I asked if she'd seen it. She shrugged. "Nope." But later that night, when she left to take out trash, I saw the corner of my notebook sticking out of her tote bag. My heart dropped. I didn't grab it. I just stared at it, confused, uneasy. Why would she even have it? And why lie? The next few days, weird things started happening. She'd bring up conversations I never remembered having. She'd insist I agreed to things I was certain I didn't. She'd claim I forgot tasks she never actually asked me to do. If I pushed back, she'd tilt her head and give me that slow, pitying look. "Babe, you're so stressed you're slipping. I'm honestly worried about you." It worked on me. I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I was forgetful. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe something was wrong with me. Then came the worst moment, when she casually mentioned that maybe I should let her handle the budgeting because numbers clearly overwhelm you. She said it with a gentle laugh, as if she were doing me a favor. Something knotted in my stomach, a tight, quiet, ugly knot. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the last few months. The missing notebook, the rewired conversations, the guilt tripping, the subtle digs, the pressure, the lies. The patterns snapped into focus all at once. Leah wasn't supporting me. She was slowly eroding me, piece by piece, confidence by confidence, until I depended on her version of reality. And for the first time in months, clarity cut through the fog. This wasn't love. It was manipulation. And though I didn't have a plan yet, a single thought settled heavily in my chest. I wasn't going to let it continue. The more I paid attention, the harder it became to deny what was happening. Leah wasn't just forgetful or stressed. She was intentionally twisting things. Once I noticed the pattern, it was everywhere. If I mentioned an expense, she'd insist we already talked about it and that I agreed she should manage the money. If I asked her to do one simple chore, she'd later claim I never asked, then scold me for springing things on her. Every disagreement ended with her sighing dramatically and saying, "You're so sensitive lately. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells." That line stuck with me because I was the one tiptoeing around the apartment like any wrong move would set her off. I found myself rehearsing sentences before speaking them, just to avoid another conversation where she made me feel like I was losing grip on reality. The notebook incident haunted me. I waited 2 days before checking her tote bag again. This time, it wasn't there. But a few pages of my handwriting started showing up in strange places. Near her laptop, on the kitchen table, even tucked under her pillow once. Like she'd been going through it and only half hiding the evidence afterward. When I asked if she'd found my notebook, she gave me that bright, innocent smile. "No idea, babe. You really should keep track of your things." It made my skin crawl. The worst part was how skilled she was at flipping everything. One night, after a long shift at the diner, I finally brought up how she talked to me. I kept my voice calm, steady. I told her I didn't like how she dismissed me or made me feel like I couldn't trust my memory. She just stared at me for a moment, then let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Wow, you're projecting hard. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting paranoid. This is exactly why I worry about you." That hit deeper than I expected. Not because it was true, but because of how confidently she said it. Like she'd already rewritten the story in her head and expected me to accept it. I didn't. Not this time. The next morning, she asked for my debit card just to grab groceries. I handed it to her without thinking, out of habit. She didn't bring back any groceries. When I asked what happened, she said the store was packed and she didn't feel like dealing with it. She passed the card back to me, but it wasn't in my wallet where I'd left it. It was on the counter, half sticking out of a drawer. Another small shift in pattern, another piece out of place. By the end of the week, I noticed a new habit. She'd stand behind me when I wrote things down. She didn't say anything, but I'd feel her watching, reading, memorizing. Like information about my own life was ammunition she planned to store for later. The breaking point came with the forgetfulness talk. She sat me down on the couch one evening, her voice soft, her hand resting gently on my knee. "I've been doing research," she said, like she was about to deliver medical news. "And I think you might be showing early signs of stress-related cognitive issues, maybe even mild memory decline." I stared at her, stunned. She kept going, telling me she'd noticed how scattered I was, how often I forgot conversations, how I seemed lost lately. She suggested, with a sympathetic smile, that maybe I should let her handle more responsibilities, for my own good. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not explosively, just a quiet, firm break, like a thin thread pulled too far. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't tell her I finally saw the game she'd been playing. I just nodded slowly and said, "Okay," because in that moment, the fear, confusion, and self-doubt finally burned off. All that remained was one cold, steady realization. She thought I was slipping. She thought she had control. She thought she could keep tightening the rope without me noticing. She had no idea I was done being her puppet. And for the first time since everything began, I felt something like relief. Because I had finally reached the point where revenge stops being an impulse and becomes a plan. Once I decided to stop playing along, everything became sharper. Every habit of hers, every lie, every place she slipped up. Leah had gotten comfortable. Too comfortable. She thought I was still tangled in the fog she created, and that overconfidence became the biggest gift she could have given me. I knew I couldn't confront her directly. She'd twist it, cry, or flip it back on me. So I started collecting the kind of details she'd been using against me. Not to throw at her, but to build a quiet safety net. The kind that would close only when I was ready to pull the string. I bought a new notebook, a cheap plain one from the dollar store. I wrote nothing personal inside it, just random notes about my shifts, recipes, and a few meaningless reminders. Then I left it in obvious places, edge of the couch, kitchen table, next to my backpack, and waited. 3 days later, I found the bookmark moved. Good. Next, I adjusted how I spoke. If she asked something, I'd repeat it back casually, loud enough for her to hear clearly. "Yeah, you said you'd take care of the laundry today." "Right, we agreed I'd buy groceries tomorrow." Just a clean, neutral confirmation. Nothing emotional, nothing she could weaponize. Her face always tightened for a split second when I did that. Then I added the part she never saw coming. Documenting. Not dramatic recordings, nothing illegal or shady. Just simple, quiet notes in my phone. Date. Time. What was said. what was moved, what she claimed, what had actually happened. A clean trail of facts, the kind she couldn't twist no matter how much she tried. I also checked my bank statements. Nothing huge was missing, but a few small charges I didn't recognize popped up. Coffee shops I'd never heard of, random craft store purchases, subscription fees I definitely hadn't approved. Small amounts, easy to overlook, easy to dismiss as honest mistakes, unless you already knew the pattern. That's when my plan sharpened. I didn't want drama. I didn't want screaming. I didn't want some petty social media blow-up. I just wanted my life back, and I wanted her to walk straight into the consequences of everything she'd built. So I gave her what she expected, a weaker, quieter version of me. I acted a little distracted, a little forgetful. I paused more before answering questions. I made small mistakes, harmless ones, just enough to reinforce her confidence that she had the upper hand. Every time she smirked or sighed or made one of those concerned comments, she thought she was steering me. But really, I was steering her. When she asked if she could organize our bills, I said sure. When she said she'd take over the weekly grocery shopping so I wouldn't have to worry, I nodded. When she insisted on handling my paycheck deposit, just for a little while, I told her I trusted her. I said it gently, softly, like someone slipping deeper into the haze she crafted. She ate it up. The more control she thought she had, the sloppier she got. She left receipts out, signed into my bank account on her laptop without covering the screen, forgot to close tabs, left notes around the apartment where she had scribbled exact phrases she planned to use on me later. Little scripts she'd been building, and while she was busy tightening the web she believed held me, I was preparing the cleanest exit possible. I opened a new bank account she didn't know about and quietly redirected my paycheck there. I took pictures of every suspicious charge and every conversation she twisted. I boxed up my important documents and left them in a locker at the gym near work. I saved copies of texts where she contradicted herself, the ones she didn't think mattered. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Manipulators rely on your guilt. They thrive on it. Once you stop feeding it to them, they lose all their power. The final step came one random Tuesday morning. Leah was sitting at the kitchen counter with her laptop open, typing something quickly. She didn't notice me walking by, so I glanced at the screen. It was a message to a friend. "He's getting worse. I think I can get him to sign over full financial control soon. He barely questions anything anymore." There it was, in her own words, the perfect ending to her months-long performance. I didn't confront her. Instead, I smiled gently, kissed her forehead, and told her I'd be home late. Because by that point, the revenge was already set in motion. All she had left to do was walk right into it. I didn't come home that night, not in a dramatic way. I simply finished my shift at the diner, grabbed the gym bag where I'd hidden my essentials, and walked straight to a cheap extended stay motel on the other side of town. $40 a night, questionable carpet, buzzing AC. But it was quiet, and it was mine. From that room, I set everything in motion. First, I logged into my bank account, the one she didn't know existed. My next paycheck had already landed safely. Then I transferred every remaining dollar from the shared account into it. Not out of spite, not to steal anything, but because every deposit in that account had come from my job. She'd never contributed a cent. Legally and morally, it was mine. Next, I froze the old account entirely. One click. Done. Then came the part she never expected. I printed out every piece of evidence I'd collected. The forged conversations, the missing funds, the receipts, the little scripts she wrote for manipulating me. And of course, the message she sent her friend. The one where she bragged about getting me to hand over financial control. I organized everything into a single envelope. The last thing I packed was her apartment key. The following morning, I called our landlord from the motel hallway. I explained, calmly, directly, that I would not be renewing the lease when the term ended in 2 weeks. I asked to be removed from the agreement early due to financial manipulation by the other tenant. He didn't push back. Apparently, I wasn't the first person with that complaint about her. He told me I could drop off my half of the key anytime. Perfect. Then I filed a fraud report with my bank for the unauthorized charges she'd made. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I just attached screenshots and let the evidence speak. The final step was simple, a short, factual email to Leah. No accusations, no anger, no emotional paragraphs she could twist into some grand narrative. Just, I'm moving out. I'm aware of what you've been doing. I've already secured my accounts, my documents, and my belongings. The landlord has been notified. Please consider this my formal notice that I'm removing myself from the lease and all shared finances. An envelope with receipts, screenshots, and records of unauthorized charges will be delivered to you today. Do not contact me. I hit send. 15 minutes later, my phone started buzzing, her name lighting up the screen over and over. Calls, texts, voicemails, long walls of messages swinging between apologies, confusion, guilt trips, and pure anger. I didn't read a single one. By noon, the calls stopped. That evening, I swung by the apartment one last time. Leah wasn't home. I left the key on the counter, placed the thick envelope beside it, and walked out without touching anything else. The silence in that hallway felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Over the next week, fallout came quietly. The bank refunded the fraudulent charges. My landlord emailed me to say Leah was handling the remainder of the lease alone. A mutual friend mentioned she'd been telling people I abandoned her. But when someone asked about the unauthorized charges and messages, she apparently changed the subject. Manipulators hate a paper trail. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. I still caught myself double-checking things, replaying memories, wondering how I let it get that far. But little by little, the fog lifted. I cooked breakfast without feeling watched. I wrote reminders in a notebook that no one else touched. I slept without bracing for a conversation that would twist my words. The real victory wasn't the frozen account or the documented evidence or the clean exit. It was realizing I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't forgetful. I wasn't fragile. I had been manipulated, slowly, quietly, expertly, and I walked out before she could finish the job. If there's any point to this story, it's this. The moment someone starts rewriting your reality, pay attention. The smallest off feeling is never actually small. And the second you stop feeding them your guilt, they lose the only power they ever had. I didn't get revenge by yelling or exposing her online or blowing up her life. I got revenge by reclaiming mine.